Yeah, everything looks great. You got 15
Excellent.
minutes.
How much?
15.
Okay, I'll time myself. I'll go as quick as possible. So thanks everyone for giving me the opportunity to present here. And I'm really sorry that I can't be in person, but we do have some regulatory sessions here in Connecticut this week that have sadly prevented me from traveling. So again, thanks for the organizers to give this opportunity to do this as the one remote person presenting today. Nonetheless, I've brought some slides and I wanted to give a bit of an overview of what we're doing at Eversource in terms of forecasting the impact of electric vehicles to our power system. To start this off, and this is probably not new to most people here, but I just did want to summarize this. We have some very ambitious decarbonization goals in the state of Massachusetts. Out of the 3 territories we serve, that is trailblazing, both on the policy and the adoption side of all the technologies. With the entire state planning to go fully decarbonized by 2050, which equates to about 93% of vehicles electrified and most of fossil fuel heating removed from the system. So that has a massive impact for us, and we expect that our system will become winter peaking between around about 2035. So we do have some time until heating kicks in on our peaks, but in the meantime, especially in the next 10 years, we'll see electric vehicles be the predominant force on driving up our system load, as those also occur during summer peaks. So just a quick highlight on what we've done at Eversource to really start looking at this transition. We've deployed several software solutions within the company through grid mod projects. We've acquired a total of $8 million in grid modernization funding over the last 2 rounds to both buy software solutions and pay for cloud computing resources or hire key talent into the advanced forecasting and modeling team. And the purpose here for us is not just to look at the forecasts, but also to engage with policy stakeholders, our capital plans, our regulators, our reliability planning on those impacts. So as much as we provide the data for system planning, I'd say if not more than 50% of our time and resources goes to policy and stakeholder engagement, because we do have the data to provide an understanding of what does it mean to go 100% electrified, be that heating, be that electric vehicles. So we have a lot of discussions from DOER, Department of Transportation, all the way down to single customers, those customers being more of our large strategic accounts like entire hospital chains or Amazon or Walmart. But we do have those discussions looking at our system capacity and how it relates to the uptake of electric vehicles. That's all I'm going to say in terms of the broad overview. But I now want to get a bit more to called the real life applications. What, as a utility, we actually end up doing with these forecasts. And again, this is not new to anybody, but why do we forecasting? If we had a magic wand and we could wave our infrastructure into existing, none of this discussion would be happening. We'd just wait until the load is here, we wave the wand, the infrastructure is there, and we're all good to go. But we do need some time to build stuff. Transmissions typically 10+ years, substations 5 to 8 years. In recent years, I would call that extremely optimistic. To get a new substation in between 5 to 8 years, distribution from your service upgrade in weeks to new circuits and right-of-ways 2 to 3 years, anywhere in between. So we look at this in terms of the forecasting that mirrors our time to deploy. So distribution forecasts, typically we don't do down to a circuit or customer forecasting. Response times there to upgrade circuits or install new services, upgrade the pad mount, pole mount are fast enough that we don't forecast. I'll have some information later on what we do for preemptive capacity projects to prevent system going overload, but we don't provide detailed inputs on when loads will appear. For substation and transmission levels, we do those forecasts. So we do bulk substation forecasts. That's a 13.4 to 115 kV systems, where we do provide the full forecasts all the way out to 2050. So what does this look like? Conceptually, high level. So the company has two forecasts it produces. Well, one forecast and what we call a long-range electric demand assessment. We don't like calling the second one a forecast because it's not really a forecast, right? It's a translation of policy objectives into load. And the only way we can really figure out what's going to happen when is if we stick very close to what the state policy has, as most of these adoptions are driven both by federal or state policy incentives, and very little of this at this point is organic growth. For the EVs, that will change. That was already made the point earlier. As soon as those are cost beneficial, even outside of incentives, and that's the key point, this will go really fast and decouple itself from state objectives. Well, anyways, we have a 10-year forecast that gets issued at a substation level. That is where we initiate our capital projects on. We have a deficiency in headroom that we identify. We start designing a project. The one thing we then do is pull our long-range demand assessments in to make sure that any solutions we design are future-proof. We might not necessarily directly install all the capacity we need to get to 2050 because it's unclear whether that capacity will ever be needed, or if charge management programs or alternate heating technologies, or God forbid we end up with hydrogen vehicles by 2050, will ever come. So we don't want to overbuild the system as well. So the trick here is to strike the balance between those two inputs and figure out how we do this. And in most cases, it comes down to provisioning capacity, enabling the upgrades in a way that future system upgrades can be made, buying the property for the substation a little bit larger to allow a new transformer, etc. So that's how this fits into context. EVs are included in both. We do EV forecasts for the bulk stations on the 10-year forecast, and we also do it for the long term. And I don't quote me on the exact numbers, but we've got about 100 and some megawatts in there for the next 10 years in Massachusetts territories for the 10-year forecast. So for the long-term electric impact assessment, we do a lot of things. I do want to focus specifically on the electric vehicles. And I heard there was a question earlier and a comment around travel data and mobility data. So that's mostly what we do. So we partner with a company called Streetlight Data, who provides us GPS tracking data for your phones. You can buy that in bulk throughout the year by type, day, season, by vehicle class. We also get the medium and heavy duty trip data that is tracked by the operators of the vehicles to understand where those fleets operate out of, how long trucks drive, how far have they driven, and that data is also available for the light duty. So how far have they driven? How long are they staying at a location? So what's their dwell time? Is it likely that they'll use that for a charging cycle if they have the capability? How empty do they return at home? So that gives us a bit of an understanding in combination with an adoption rate forecast, because I think this was mentioned earlier for fleets as well as for residential, just because the vehicle is bought somewhere doesn't mean it actually ends up charging elsewhere. And one of our key examples for this is the Cape region, and one to pick out is Martha's Vineyard, very nice place to visit. It has a couple of thousand vehicles in the winter and more than 40,000 in the summer. So if we go purely by registration data on that island, we'd never see a problem. So this mobility data really helps us understand that. So once and I'll get into a bit more detail in a second on what that data looks like. I just want to kind of wrap up the discussion here. So once we have this data, this is what this looks like. We have our 10-year forecast on the left-hand side. We have our long-term demand assessment on the right-hand side. We understand what our capacity deficiency is, and we have our 10-year reliability plan to upgrade that. And then we have a gap. A gap exists. And optimistically speaking, we're probably going to upgrade every single substation by the time we're in 2050. By the time we're at 2050, our system. And that's not just for electric vehicles, but heating and everything else as well. So the big question is now, it's not how do we prevent the upgrade of every single substation, but how do we reduce the need for new substations from 50 to 30 or 50 to 20? And the big question here, this is where we start engaging with our counterparts on the regulatory and policy side, looking at the demand rates, looking at new rate structures, incentives, charge management, new building codes to drive down heating demand for buildings. All of this plays into the equation of how we bridge this gap. So what are we seeing here? Just some examples. And you can see very quickly here, for 2020, we already have some space heating in there. And the peaks for 2050 winter peak. Now, keep in mind, this is when the system peaks, right? This doesn't mean that there's less EV charging in the winter. EV charging just happens to happen not at the time our heating peak is. Heating peaks are in the morning, EV charging peaks tend to be in the afternoon. So we have some benefits there in the winter when heating and EV don't align. But for the summer peak, and this is what we're seeing today, we already have significant uptakes on the EV load. And you can see this throughout a single day. This is for 2050, what this looks like. And we're estimating somewhere between 27 to 46 billion dollars of incremental capital expenses for the distribution system in Massachusetts, with 46 being the unmanaged, uncontrolled upgrade, and 27 is with most or all synergies lifted from charge management, demand management, co-siting of resources, coordination between generation and load. So I brought some examples. This is public information. We've presented this to City Council in Cambridge. We've even got a Boston Globe article on it. Found it very interesting. So I just to show you what this looks like. Ignore the left-hand side. That's the heating topics. Also very interesting. But let's look at the right-hand side. So this is what this ends up looking like for us. We will have these profiles by station. We can get them by station or by zip code. And they'll give us our expected arrival profiles or charging profiles. We can convert either which way. So this is a charging profile. And Cambridge is a high inbound commute community. We have a lot of morning inbound commute. Very little residents in Cambridge actually drive for work. So they are a bit opposite to what most of the system will look like. They see a morning peak. So they're very interesting for us right now, because now in the mornings, their peak doesn't collide with their existing system peak. So we are less worried in the next 2 or 3 years about EVs being a problem. However, long-term, this will be a problem for us because this will automatically collide with our projected winter heating peak. So winter morning, a lot of inbound commute traffic. In winter, we see more commute traffic than in the summer. Will drive up load on the system, and that'll collide directly with the heating peak. So this is like one example of what this might look like. We're also working very closely with our rates departments to design new rates. Companies released an EV2 rate that targets very specifically large charging installations greater than 100 kilowatts. That's a time of use rate. And we're using exactly this mobility data by territory or by station to help inform how these rate designs happen. There's another whole house EV rate that is going to be coming soon as well that will allow residences that have an EV charger at home to switch to a whole house rate with a time of use component. Another example of how this gets applied. The next thing, and this is that I mentioned, where we don't do the long-term assessments by circuit level, but what we do is we classified every single one of our customers, a total of 3.5 million customers in our territory, through a clustering approach by looking at their characteristics from income to single-family house to heating capability. Is it a family's kids presence? Yes, no. Is it single or dual vehicle household? And we've basically moved those into, for gas, there's an additional category, the no gas, no others, but mostly we aligned ourselves with the standard product adoption curve from innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards. And we're basically informing our distribution engineering plans similarly. So if they have a project, they are going out to reconduct our circuit, upgrade a pole mount. If that pole mount or that circuit is highly at risk due to a large percentage of innovators or early adopters, those circuits are flagged up and they will automatically do a 1+ installation. So they'll go to the largest available conductor size, they'll go to the largest available pole mount or pad mount size to ensure that we don't run into any issues. So that's kind of how that information plays on the short-term plans. So this is outside of the long-term plans, this is the short-term information. And I think with that, I'm done. And I don't know, is that 50, that's more or less 15 minutes, right on time.